This is beautiful. Hi, everybody. I'm Wayne Glenn. We are with Mother Nature in Christian County at Garrison Spring. Garrison Spring is about a mile northeast of the Ozark Square. We're not far at all from civilization, but I feel like you will feel like we're with Mother Nature. Today, we're going to go on a video trip all over Christian County from one end of the county to the other. We're going to see places that were made by Mother Nature, like Garrison Spring, and some that were made by pioneers and early folks. Let's get started. We begin our tour of Christian County sites with a view of southern Christian County from your narrator's backyard. My wife, Naira, and myself live on the farm I was raised on, just a mile southeast of Nixa. My folks, Myron and Irene Payne Glenn, bought the 80-acre farm in 1949 after my dad's Navy service in World War II. This great view is duplicated at hundreds of sites all over diverse Christian County. While the view is great looking south and southeast toward the Finley Creek Valley and beyond toward Selmore and Highlandville, the ground is among the rockiest in the county. There's hardly a spot one can dig on our 80 acres where there isn't loads and loads of rocks and only a small helping of soil. But my dad made a living milking 15 to 30 cows twice daily, 7 days a week, and growing alfalfa hay, even among all those rocks. I graduated from Nixa High School in 1965 and have been determined to keep the farm that I inherited from my parents, even though I am no farmer. Busy downtown Billings near the crossroads that has long been the economic business center of the town. Billings as a town dates back to December 1871, when Captain Edward Morris became the first postmaster of the still very small village that had just been named for railroad entrepreneur Frederick Billings, who gave land and money for the establishment of a Union church in the new railroad village. Now, before it was named Billings, there had been 2 post offices near the town of Billings. Elba was first, founded by Sampson Barris in the early 1860s, and then Plymouth was established on the north end of what became Billings. The new Frisco Railroad created the town of Billings, although families such as the Garoots and Laneys had come to the area as farmers as early as the 1830s. In less than a decade, progressive Billings became the second largest town in developing Christian County, second only to Ozark. A large German immigration helped this trend continue well into the 1900s. Billings is located in the far western panhandle of Christian County. Let's take a general look at the lay of the land in the extreme northwest corner of Christian County. We're looking west toward the Lawrence County line from our camera spot on Rose Hill Road. Just a little more than a mile from this site, Christian County borders both Greene and Lawrence County near the landmark of Kerrs Spring, which is barely in Greene County. Now, in the early days, Oak Hill Rural School educated the children in this district, and students wishing to go on to high school from this area ordinarily would go to Billings, although the roads in those days led a number of youth to actually attend high school at Republic. Now, while this specific area is not the best farmland around Billings, it was superior to most farmland in the county, for overall, the Billings district likely had the best farmland of any region in the county. And add to that the ingenuity, thriftiness, and mechanical know-how of the farmers who settled here, and you have a prosperous region of Christian County, especially in the days when farming was the way by which most people made their living. Terrell Creek begins its east-northeastward trek from just east of the town of Billings. Currently, we are viewing this lovely stream near the former location of the Billings Boy Scout cabin and swimming area, which was a headquarters of the Billings community social life for 2 generations. Nearby rural schools were Teedy School to the north and Lane School nearly straight south. The stream was named for one of the area's early pioneers, Cornelius D. Terrell, who came to Greene County in the 1830s. Terrell married Elizabeth Welson, the widow of James Welson, for whom Welson Creek was named. An early Greene County elected official, Terrell and family moved south into Taney County in 1840, where Terrell died in 1850. North of Clever, Loose Branch flows into Terrell Creek. Farther east, the Missouri Pacific Railroad used to stop for passengers and freight at a spot known as Terrell Station. Terrell Creek empties into the Welson Creek, just above the spot where Welson Creek then empties into the James River. While on Highway 14 between Clever and Billings, watch for the road sign that spells out Smart Road. Turn south on Smart Road and watch for an old cemetery on the east side of that road. That is where we are now. This road and this community cemetery represented a division between the Clever and Billings districts. The Smarts were very early settlers of this western part of Christian County, long before the county had been created. When the Smarts came here, this was still a part of Greene County. The earliest marked graves at this site seem to be from the 1850s. The mother of the early Smarts had married Ozark, Missouri pioneer Benjamin Chapman after the death of her first husband, but some of her offspring went on westward from the Ozark district to the wilds of what would one day be Christian County. This new Smart settlement was the original voting place for the few other white pioneers who had homesteaded in this largely uninhabited territory. Good farmers, the Smarts were closely connected to the equally early Garrison clan that planted their lives west of future Clever. Things are busy today in downtown Clever. We're looking south toward the Shubaugh Feed Mill on the distant right. Closer to our camera on the right is the Jones Store, which dates back to the 1920s or before. Clever by name was founded on July 29, 1892 at the crossroads, which is where Highways 14 and K currently intersect north of our present location. Its name came from local resident Tom Lentz, who thought the people around Clever were just that, pretty clever. 15 years later, in 1907, the Missouri Pacific Railroad chugged through for the first time, creating a boomtown at Clever for a few years. Old-time settler Henry Inman and his wife gave much land so that the town could develop near the railroad crossing south of the original crossroads. The railroad went on south from Clever to Brown Spring, Hurley, and Crane. The land around Clever was good soil, and the town became an agriculture center for a number of generations. In 1972, the Missouri Pacific pulled up their tracks, but the population of Clever has continued to grow. On the spring day, we visited this spring house on the Old Wire Road, a mile or so southwest of Clever. The birds were singing, and a few blossoms were appearing on flowers and trees. This little valley was a different story. Around 5 p.m. on August 2, 1861, for that is when the Union and Confederate forces went into battle against each other at this spring house site, which was known as Doug Springs. The Civil War opponents had met here because the telegraph line and Wire Road went right by this fresh and clear water spring. The Confederates were pushed off to the south, but the bigger confrontation would take place up the Wire Road on Wilson Creek in a very few days in a major battle of the Civil War. This is also very near the route of the Butterfield stage, which went from northern Missouri all the way to California. In 1907, the Missouri Pacific Railroad built their tracks out of Clever, going south very near this same spot. For many years, much of this valley has been farmed by the Hodges family. ZZ Highway intersects with Highway 14 east of Clever. At one of the sharp turns on ZZ, on the northwest corner of this intersection, is planted a Springfield University Club marker, which the viewer sees here. The sign denotes this spot as the location of John C. Ashmore's station. It wasn't a gas station, rather it was the only stop in Christian County for horses and passengers on the John Butterfield Overland stage that extended from Tipton, Missouri to California. Established in 1858, the Ashmore station was actually the Ashmore's home. Mr. Ashmore was born in Tennessee in 1802 and died at this homestead in 1878. He's buried at Delaware Cemetery on the James River. The Battle of Wilson Creek was just to the northeast of this area, and anyone at Ashmore Station would have heard the cannons of war when that battle was fought. In later years, the Antioch Community Church was located on the south end of this intersection. Do not be deceived. This open field area on Holder Road, east of Clever and west of Nixa, was the site of the first civilized village in what is now Christian County. This field was the location of Delaware Town. Delaware Town, or village, was the headquarters village of the civilized Delaware Indians while they lived, farmed, and hunted along the James River and its tributaries from around 1820 into the early 1830s. This field, on the west side of the river, is bounded by the James River itself to the east and Green Valley Creek, which comes in from the southwest. There is also a freshwater spring at the site. Wilson Creek empties into the James River a short distance to the north of this landmark, all in Christian County. Few Indians actually lived in this field, but the local chief and his immediate family would have been headquartered right here, as were a few white settlers and traders and merchants who sought and bought and traded goods with the Indians. This was the site for the signing of a number of important treaties that affected pioneer whites and their Indian counterparts. The vast majority of the Delaware and Shawnee Indians that were forced westward to this reserve had their teepees or tents and primitive cabins all up and down the James River from this central location, all the way to near the Yoakum settlement at what is now known as Jamesville in Stone County, where the Finley River goes into the James. Dependable local tradition says that numerous Indians were buried on the hill or bluff just to the northwest of this field. This site was chosen for the village partly because there was already an older Indian crossing or ford of the James River at this location. After the last Indians had been moved on to Kansas in the early 1830s, white pioneers built the so-called Delaware Bridge at this same spot. Just across the James River to the east is the Delaware Cemetery, which likely was an original Indian burial ground. Busy Highway 14 and Main Street intersect in old downtown Nixa, with the cornerstone landmark buildings that date from the very early 1900s. In the really old days, Highway 14 was known as the Mount Vernon Road because it was the primitive highway that connected the county seat of Christian County, Ozark, Missouri, to the county seat of Lawrence County, Mount Vernon. Nixa's current Main Street was, with some winds and curves that no longer exist, the road from Springfield to Highlandville and on to Harrison, Arkansas. Nixa was first named Foughts in 1878 because the first storekeeper near this crossroads was James Fought. Actually, his first store was at the southeast corner of North Main and North Street. Foughts, the village, was renamed Nixa in 1881 as a strange combination of the terms Nixit, which is a German slang term for unimportant, and village blacksmith Nicholas A. Inman. There is no mill on the Finley at this location, but thankfully the long-standing dam is just that, still standing and helping to create a beautiful picture. We present Riverdale with a modern bridge in 2009. Riverdale can be visited by going south of Nixa on Highway 160 and then turning to the east on Pawnee Road for about a mile. From at least 1857, there was a working flour mill at this location until the mill finally totally ceased to operate by the 1930s. Just above this dam, Elk Creek empties into the Finley Creek, and it was at this site that some of the Delaware Indians camped and hunted in the 1820s. Two of the first white families to explore and permanently settle in future Christian County stopped to build cabins on Elk Valley, Elk Creek, very near this landmark. They were the Friend and Pettyjohn clans. It was flour and grist miller Homer Gilmore who really founded Riverdale, bringing a post office and general store to this site by the 1890s. A few miles down Finley River, or Finley Creek from Riverdale, is the landmark Hawkins Bridge, which was constructed in 1915. It is barely in Christian County. You find it by taking Riverdale Road, which intersects with Highway 160, south of Nixa, and going to the southwest. This district is best known as the home area of the Wasson family, who came to this territory from Stone County in the 1860s. One of the Wasson daughters, Lucy, married George Hawkins of Jamesville, and one of their sons, Herbert Hawkins, became a major farmer in this river bottom. He finally succeeded in getting a good iron bridge for the community, and it informally took the family's name. The Harmony or Clon School was nearby. Now, if you cross over Finley Creek using the Hawkins Bridge, you will see a picnic ground on your right. That is the summer encampment site of the Wasson-McCullough Family Reunion, which has been an annual event since the late 1800s. Just down the stream a couple of miles is Jamesville in Stone County. When this village was founded in the 1870s, there was already a road traversing the highland spot. This rough wagon and horse road ran all the way from Springfield into Arkansas. It was called the Wilderness Road. We are visiting downtown Highlandville. Although they were far from being the first settlers of the community, Highlandville was named and started by Frank Kentling and his wife, Katie Kentling. Both were of Germanic backgrounds, who surely spoke German better than Ozarkian, but the Kentlings, through their Dutch store, became extremely successful merchants with a landmark site that was known to weary travelers for hundreds of miles around. In the 1880s and 90s, numerous other families came to Highlandville going into business, so that the village was certainly on the grow, acquiring a bank, livery stables, an Oddfellows Hall, blacksmith shops, and many other concerns. Eventually, the Wilderness Road became Highway 123, later Highway 160. So which is it? Do we call this hidden away old Christian County village Torrey or Montague? It is 2 miles west of Highway 160 on O Highway. The little waterway that runs through this site is known as Torrey Creek, but when a post office was established at the village in 1900, the name Montague was chosen as its official title. For a few years, there were 2 or 3 stores with a blacksmith shop and the local rural school, which was identified as Torrey. And the Peter Price family used the waters of Torrey Creek to establish a flour mill for a few years around 1900 too. But after the village had begun to fade in the 1920s, a retired Springfield educator named W.W. Thomas bought the old mill site and founded a fish hatchery. He died soon thereafter. His partner, Henry LeCompte, bought out the Thomas heirs, expanding and polishing up the hatchery so that even in 2009, the fish are still waiting to be caught by interested tourists. Christian County cannot claim the exciting early history of the village of Ponce de Leon because, in fact, Ponce de Leon is in Stone County. But the Ponce de Leon Cemetery, is in Christian County by a stone's throw. To find it, go west on Highway 160 at Spokane, and then get on Gulf Creek Road, and simply stay on that road, which often runs right beside Gulf Creek, and you will come to this cemetery, which is on land homesteaded in 1873 by James McGinnis and his wife, Sarah Dalton. Mr. McGinnis is a very interesting Christian County pioneer. The McGinnises had a daughter named Sarah McGinnis, who wed Sam Lee in 1884. Sam Lee was from the McCall Bridge District over on the James River. The Lees inherited the land around the cemetery, and in 1893, Sam and Sarah officially deeded an acre or so of the rough hillside for cemetery use. Both Mr. and Mrs. Lee are buried here. Of all the towns in Christian County which date back to the 1890s or before that still exist, Spokane is probably the one which has always had a small downtown. As we show you Spokane, as it appears in 2009, looking to the south, the primary sites, other than nice homes, are the post office and the Spokane First Baptist Church. The fine school is further south on Old Highway 160, which was Highway 65 when this was the main thoroughfare through the village. Today, regular Highway 160 runs parallel with the old business route to its west. The village post office was founded on April 3, 1892, by David Hawthorne. The locals had wanted the village to be called Rock as a joke regarding the item most often found in the ground in these hills. But that idea was already taken. The town survived and finally began to grow because of its good school system. The Eisenhower Community Cemetery southwest of Spokane surrounds the Eisenhower Community Church. Now, these are 2 symbols of the district, with Stone County being straight to the south and west from this site, which is immediately east of Highway 160. Taney County is a short distance to the southeast of the cemetery and church. The Eisenhowers, Rances, and Patricks were 3 of the clans that made up the early settlers of this fairly rough farmland. The closest rural schools to the Eisenhower district were at Reno and Flat Rock. Today, the students living on the Christian County side of the community line generally attend the Spokane schools. The closest general store to this site existed briefly from 1894 to 1901 and was called Puller in honor of its founder, Benjamin Puller. Otherwise, folks living in this district would have likely traded down to the east at Reno, or up north at Windy City, or possibly down to see the folks at Shirky's. We came to this area of extreme southern Christian County by going east from the Eisenhower Cemetery on Reno Springs Road, which takes a traveler through 3 counties in a very short distance. Yes, we get to see Stone, Taney, and Christian counties for the price of 1 ticket. When you come to the intersection of Reno Springs Road and Reno Holler Road, you take a right and progress on Reno Springs Road, heading generally back southeastward. Now, just before leaving Christian County, you will see this pretty spring, which helps adjacent Bear Creek eventually become a noteworthy body of water as it flows into Taney County. It is true, there was a boom town of Reno near this pictured spot, which was founded in 1880. So how did Reno in southern Christian County get its name? The story was told that some explorers in 1880 found a stone at this spring which had written on it, Francis Reno, 1764. A stream known as Woods Fork begins just southeast of Highlandville and wanders to the east and south for many miles through rough terrain, eventually flowing into Bull Creek, east of Chestnut Ridge on the east side of Highway 65. Not wanting to leave out a sighting of this beautiful body of Christian County water, we decided the best place to find Woods Fork would be on Woods Fork Road, which exits off Highway 65 to the east across from Green Mountain Ridge Road. Now, if you're confused, bear with us and simply enjoy the beauty of this shot. In the 1880s and 1890s, there was a major grist mill at this spot, with the waters of Woods' Fork providing the needed natural power. The originator of this big mill was Mr. Jacob Carter, who was the ancestor of many folks who would later populate Spokane and Chestnut Ridge. In the 1910 era, the Norwine family came here from Riverdale, Missouri, and opened a store and post office not far from this terrain. We picture Selmore looking south with the Selmore Baptist Church and the community cemetery on the left and the Selmore Christian Church on the right or west side of Old Highway 65. Selmore is about 4 miles south of Ozark on what was a major road from Springfield to the Branson area and Arkansas for years until Highway 65 bypassed the village, destroying any active merchandising that might have survived into the 1960s. The town started in 1892 with a post office run by one William White, who was actually from nearby Highlandville, and the name came from the fact that the first merchants in the village were determined to sell more than their competition. The local rural school was Berea. Never a major business center, Claude Hanks was probably the most successful merchant in the town in the years before World War II, at which point he moved his auto sales and garage business into downtown Ozark in partnership with Willie Skaggs, who was raised on a farm near Riverdale. When Christian County was formed in 1859, there were 3 villages in the new county, usually listed as being worthy of mention as being of some size. They were Ozark, Linden or Kenton, and Bull Mills. Today there is little to denote the historic importance of Bull Mills, but we are determined to show you where it was. The old site of Bull Mills can be reached by going east out of Ozark on Highway 14. Turn to the south or right on County Road, or is it State Road, W. Stay on W until you have the chance to turn left or east on Red Bridge Road. When you actually come to the old 1915 Red Bridge, which is now more rusty than red, you have come to Bull Creek. We submit that this low population part of the county is one of the prettiest and most refreshing. The little village of Bull Mills was actually upstream from the Red Bridge a short mile, with the 1840-era post office in the home of Richard Jones. That house was next to the current Cobb-Keaton Cemetery. We are looking to the south at the Prospect Baptist Church and Cemetery, which is located southeast of Ozark. Go east out of Ozark on Highway 14, turn south on State Highway W to Old Prospect Road, and then turn right or back to the west. The Prospect Baptist congregation is one of the very oldest in southwest Missouri, having been founded in 1846, even before the Ozark Baptist Church. In fact, Prospect Church is the mother church of a number of other Baptist organizations in our county. Ephraim Ray was the first pastor of the fellowship, which first met in a log cabin type church. In 1855, William Loyne gave the land for the church at its current site. At the same time, Mr. Loyne also set aside land for the cemetery, with his wife being the first one buried here. The current church building is over 100 years old, having been constructed in 1905. In the early days, there was also a large Prospect rural school nearby. Few longtime residents of Christian County would need to be told where and what this large 3-story building is, but just in case, this is the Christian County Courthouse and the square in Ozark, Missouri. This courthouse was occupied in 1921. There had been 2 previous courthouses. The first, which was quite small, sat on the north side of the square. It was built in 1860 and burned to the ground as a result of a set fire in 1865, just after the conclusion of the Civil War. No one was ever convicted of that crime. William Loyne and John Weaver built the next larger courthouse in 1866. It was torn down after 1919 to make room for the new one. Without question, the events on the Christian County Courthouse lawn would fill many volumes, but the Ballnobber trials and hangings of the 1880s are still among the most monumental occurrences connected with this middle-of-the-square ground. In the late 1880s, while the Ballnobbers were being tried for their supposed crimes, a special brick building was constructed to house all of them. This so-called Ballnobber jail sat in what is now an open space at the southwest corner of the courtyard. The 3 Ballnobber hangings took place in semi-public view in this southwest corner area in 1889. The first recorded white family to live and farm at what became Ozark were the Benjamin Chapmans, who were living near the current site of the Chapman Cemetery on the Finley near the 2009 First Baptist Church site. The Chapmans were certainly at their homestead by 1830. Ozark was first called Hoover's Mill. since the grist mill on the Findlay was owned and operated in the late 1830s by one John Hoover. In 1840, Hoover's mill became Ozark, in reference to the Ozark Plateau and the Ozark Mountains that Ozark and Christian County are so attached to. Another of the true landmarks of Ozark and Christian County as a whole have to be the Ozark Mill, the dam and the bridge near it, and of course Findlay Creek itself. It was not an accident that Ozark the village started at this very site. A wagon trail forded the Findlay at this location as it wove its way from Springfield into North Arkansas. And most likely the white man's path was first stomped out by the Osage Indians long before 1800. John Hoover did establish his mill near the site of this current mill in the mid-1830s. A larger mill was built by William Loyne and John Weaver just before the Civil War, near the same time that they built a covered wagon bridge at the very location where the steel bridge sits today. The current mill structure was completed in 1939 by the Hawkins family, who had established their business here in the early 1920s. The Frisco tracks also passed very near here, just to the south of the current bridge. Of all the landmarks of Mother Nature in Christian County, the awe-inspiring Smollen Cave has to be at the top of the list. While there are many, many caves in our county, the Smollen Cave surely has the biggest mouth of them all. While Smollen Cave doesn't have the largest opening in the world, as has sometimes been rumored, it remains spectacular, as hopefully you can see by this view. Everyone in our county should see it sometime. Put that on your list. It is north and east of Ozark on Smollen Road and is just north of Findlay Creek in the vicinity of Riverside Inn. The first major white explorer to visit future Christian County was Henry Schoolcraft, who made his breakthrough journey in 1818 and 1819. He was overwhelmed when he and his one fellow traveler, Levi Pettibone, viewed the Mammoth Cave for the first time. Schoolcraft called this landmark Winoka, which is an Ozark Indian phrase for underground spirit, probably Osage. By the 1850s, other map makers had renamed Winoka the Fountain Cave, and it kept this title on numerous maps for decades. But for local people who lived in the cave's community, it had become known as Smollen Cave because the family that owned the property from 1852 on for many years were the Smollens. The elders of that clan were Jerry Smollen and his wife, Jane Stapp Smollen. The Smollens were happy to have school and other community groups to come to the picnic area at this cave. And for 100 years, the Smollen Cave was one of the sure destinations for any explorer kids or romantic couples wishing to be inspired by Cupid's natural arrows. In the early 1960s, the cave briefly became known as the Civil War Cave. Today, it is owned by an Assembly of God Church Fellowship in Springfield. And yes, there is another small opening to this cave about a mile away. When Christian County was formed from Webster, Greene, and Taney counties in 1859, this village was the second largest business district in the new county, second only to Ozark. There was serious talk about this spot, Linden, being the county seat. And although that didn't happen, Linden was a busy area in the late 1840s through the Civil War era. Linden was founded and platted by the pioneer Friend clan. Technically, the post office and town were called Kenton in honor of a trader and adventurer of Kentucky fame by the name of Simon Kenton. In 1860, Kenton, or Linden, on Findlay Creek, had a population of 105, and a lot of business folks, including a doctor. The grist and then flour mill was always a cornerstone of the community, and the old mill set on the left as we look at the beautiful Findlay and its Linden Dam. The Hawkins family sold out of the mill business here in the early 1920s, moving on to Ozark. While on Highway 125 in the general vicinity of Linden, go north from Linden to U Highway, which goes east. After having traveled about 3 miles, you will come to this lovely Elm Grove Methodist Church, which will serve as a landmark for this part of Christian County, which is also known, by the way, as Roller Community, since the Roller Cemetery is a short distance to the southwest of the church on Roller Road. The church is only about a mile from the Greene County line, which is to the north. Now, this is near the site of the original Elm Grove Schoolhouse, which served the community from the Civil War into the World War II era. Elm Grove students now attend Rogersville schools. In the early days, the school was usually called Roller. Not far to the southwest was the Blue Star Rural School over on Highway 125. A short distance to the east and north is the now deserted site of Wattsville. which was the primary general store for this district in pioneer days. From Elm Grove Methodist Church, we have moved on east for an additional 3 or 4 miles on U Highway to the Spring Hill community. Or is it the Lashley settlement? Or is it better known as Green Hill? Or how about Petelow? That's right. All of the above names have been used, officially and unofficially, for this northeast part of Christian County. The major cemetery here says Spring Hill on the sign, but other names show up. The old store we're taking pictures of is on the south side of U Highway, and it was run from the World War I era into the 1970s by the Loveland family. The founder of the store under that name was Elvin Loveland, who kept the doors open until about 1959 when he passed away. Then his daughter Goldie took over, and finally, until the 1970s, the Raymond Lovelands ran the store. And by the way, what does Petelow mean? Well, it's an old Indian word for shot pouch. I've lived in Christian County just about all my life up to this point, and I've heard of the Sherrill Bridge and Sherrill community for a long time. And even though I've seen a lot of the diverse region we call Christian County, I had never been to the Sherrill Bridge until today. It's very near the Webster County line to the north and only about 3 miles from the Douglas County line to the east. This is the first Christian County bridge to cross over the Finley Creek in the northeast part of the county. As the Finley heads on down the line toward places like Linden, Ozark, and Riverdale, where we've already been. The bridge crossing is on Arapahoe Road and just off Ballard Road, and is hard to find if you're not familiar with the district. The original Sherrill Bridge and the Sherrill Rural School was named for the Sherrill family, who homesteaded in this part of the county in the 1880s. Without a bridge, it was almost impossible to get from one side of the river to the other if there was any kind of flooding. As we stand on the bridge, we can see Martin's Branch emptying into the Finley Creek from the east. We are viewing some of the best farmland in Christian County as we stand beside Braden Road in the northeast part of the county. The valley below is part of many miles of fine farmland created by the Finley Creek through the ages. The nice folks that let us film from their hillside are the Allens. Mrs. Allen tells me she and her husband were both from the Chadwick area. Today her son milks about 50 dairy cows just behind our camera. In the old days, all of these creek bottoms belonged to a few families that made the smart decision in the 1830s and 40s to homestead them. The McAfees were the family that likely claimed the most good creek bottom farmland, but the relation, the Bradens, and the Braziles were not far behind in getting their share of this excellent soil. Also, unofficially, your narrator believes that the McAfees are the earliest pioneer family in our county that still have blood descendants that currently own at least part of their ancestors' original homesteaded land. Here's Bruner, Missouri in eastern Christian County on Highway 14, just east of Sparta. Bruner was officially named and created in 1895 when merchant and blacksmith James Rathbun, who had been born in Pennsylvania, got approval for a post office. Actually, there had been an earlier post office near this site starting in 1871. It was called Elkhead. But when the Elkhead store and post office were moved about 3 miles east on current 14, a need for a new post office was created. The name Bruner seems to have no local meaning or significance. From the early 1890s until the Rathbunds sold their main store to the John Teague family in 1923, the Rathbunds were the force in the village, and then the John Teague clan became almost synonymous with Bruner, the village. Mrs. John Teague, Bessie Teague, was the longtime postmaster for the community from 1923 until her 1963 retirement. We're looking to the west on Highway 14 in downtown Sparta in 2009. Sparta was founded in 1876 by the Bruton family, who first ran the post office. In 1882, the little village became a boom town as the Frisco Railroad tracks were constructed on the south side of the burg, and the Chadwick Flyer came through for the first time. For the next few years, Sparta grew consistently, eventually becoming a thriving town. A number of churches were founded at Sparta, with an academy-type school which boasted real high education for kids of all ages. William Roberts started a bank in 1900. The Hobart and Lee Tie and Timber Company was headquartered here from the beginning of the railroad into the early 1900s. Just as the railroad gave life in 1882 to the town, it also took some of that life away when the stakes for the railroad track were pulled up in 1934. But today, Sparta is the third largest town in Christian County. From Sparta, we have taken Highway 125 southeastward to the village of Oldfield, which is the home of a post office and a gas station, a few other miscellaneous businesses, and the famous Oldfield Opry, which is a Saturday night tradition for many folks around Oldfield and beyond. The Oldfield Opry building is on the west side of Highway 125, right before you come to the intersection of 125 and T Highway. The Oldfield Opry represents an effort by local folks to not completely lose their musical roots and their community spirit. Lots of rural-type communities like Oldfield have lost their identity, but the Oldfield Opry has helped these folks keep theirs. The village was founded in 1900 with the first postmaster being Charles Stetler, but it would be the Gardner, Hull, Shipman, and Walker clans that would be around the longest. This intersection dates back to the earliest white man days, for this path was trod by Henry Schoolcraft when he was exploring the Ozarks in 1818-1819. After leaving Oldfield, we went east on Highway T, then turned back to the south on Moody Ridge County Road, and then we took a left on Bray Mine Road, and in only a couple of minutes, here we are, filming the site of the oldest mine shaft in Christian County history. Yes, this fenced-off hole, with heavy vegetation all around it, is the Bray Mine, a seemingly totally insignificant man-made hole. There's a long story that goes with this spot, but for now, let's just say that the hole was first opened to 20 feet in 1853 by a miner named David Porter, who had partners Calvin Bray of future Sparta and attorney William C. Price of Springfield. They successfully discovered lots of lead, which they mined and smelted 3 or 4 miles west of this site on Bull Creek in what became known as Smelter Holler. Around 30 more diggings and shafts were dug in the 1850s. All 3 partners chose the Confederate side in the Civil War, and all 3 lost most of what they had. After visiting the first of many Bray mines, your host decided to follow the Bray Mine Road on south and east to its dead end. We were very glad we did, because what we experienced was real beauty. Some of the most beautiful and intimate landscape anywhere in Christian County. This terrain is accentuated by the clear-as-a-crystal Swan Creek, which is on its long journey to Forsyth. Swan Creek starts in the Dogwood area of Douglas County. It's visible for many miles on Highway T between Oldfield and the old Keltner Post Office. Just above the area we are photographing is the old Boston Cemetery community, which was notably founded and settled by one Joel Hall and his large clan in the 1840s. Mr. Hall was a prominent justice of the peace. Certainly Swan Creek was named for swans, but no pioneers that we've read about ever remember seeing any swans on the creek. Keltner as a village was never more than a trading post operated by Ira Henry and his family, a post office and a blacksmith shop with a school and a church nearby. But Keltner was a Christian County community as long as the store and post office were open, which covered the years from 1905 to 1973. Mr. Henry only arrived in this valley in the 1890s, but once he saw the beauty of Swan Creek and was able to make enough money to survive, he stayed. It is true, this was poor country for farming, unless you were lucky enough to be one of the very first ones to settle it, and then you might have found a rare creek bottom where the soil was richer. The Burkharts, Harvilles, Lovelands, Nelsons, and other families were among the first to settle around this area. They all came before the Civil War. The word that there might be valuable minerals hidden in the rocky soil lured some other families to this district, along with the railroad tie hewing industry, which developed in the 1880s. Keltner is about 8 miles east of Oldfield on T Highway. We will not try to identify the exact location of this breathtaking scenery. I just will say we were in a lucky person's front yard filming something they are able to call their own every day, something you can't put a price on. After leaving Keltner, we headed southeast on T Highway and then turned on UU Highway, generally going back to the southwest. The view we are seeing is taken from the extreme east-central part of Christian County, looking east and mostly southeast for 30 or 40 miles into the natural beauty of the Ozarks towards south of Ava and Gainesville. There are those that say on a really clear, clean air day, you can see maybe all the way to the Boston Mountains of Arkansas. If you have children living in this district, they attend school at Bradleyville. In the old days, youngsters would have attended school at Walker Rural School, which was also known as Oak Ridge. Chadwick, the former railroad town, is south of Sparta and Oldfield on Highway 125, which is where we are now. Yes, Chadwick was created by the ancestor of the Frisco Railroad in the early 1880s. The town was likely named for John Chadwick, who was a railroad worker killed while helping bring the train tracks to southeast Christian County. Chadwick would qualify as an authentic boom town, which went from nothing to a town of some size and success very quickly. One of the driving forces that fed increased land values and land speculators were the constant newspaper rumors that train officials would soon give the word to start working on extending the tracks from Chadwick south into Arkansas and beyond. No such order ever came. Besides the land speculator factor, another big reason for Chadwick's growth was the tie industry. Yet in 1934, the railroad pulled up stakes and ties, leaving Chadwick to decline nearly as rapidly as it had previously boomed. After departing Chadwick, we stay on Highway 125 for about 8 miles so that we can see another lovely part of Christian County that many county residents have never observed. Not that this Garrison Valley is totally hidden away. We are told by folks who live at Garrison that there is a lot of traffic on Highway 125. The village of Garrison on Swan and Barber Creeks was founded by Linden, Missouri native George Garrison in 1884. He was running a general store at the time, but soon went back to farming after serving only about a year as the local postmaster. For many years, there were usually 2 general stores at Garrison, with a blacksmith shop also in business. At one time, the Jones family opened their large house as a hotel for weary travelers, and the Scotts had a livery stable, and there was a campground. A number of the early settlers around Garrison had been lured to the area by the promise of minerals. When those dreams did not pan out, such families were usually forced to move on. The Ray Rosells came to the valley in the 1930s and opened a popular general store. That old store still stands on the north side of Garrison's Missionary Baptist Church. The other general store further south is now also empty. It was the last location of the Garrison Post Office, which closed a few years ago. In other parts of this travelogue video, we have viewed the northwest corner of Christian County, northwest of Billings. We went to one of the southwest tips of the county near Eisenhower Cemetery. By filming the Sherrill Bridge, we saw the lay of the land in the extreme northeast corner of our diverse county. Now we have driven east and south from Garrison on Highway 125 on the way to Bradleyville, which is barely in Taney County. Now, there are no great markers or monuments or overwhelming wonders in this extreme southeast part of our county. Or is this green valley, with grazing cattle and with hills all around it, a pretty neat gift from our Creator? This view is near the corner of Highways 125 and UU. We hope you have enjoyed this 1-hour tour of Christian County. It is also our hope that it has helped prove that Christian County has a very interesting past and an unlimited future. We're just about ready to wind up our trip. We've been all over the Christian County territory, and I thought we would go back to Nixa, just southwest of Nixa, not very far from the James River, at a place known as Young Spring. And this goes on maps that date back as early as old Father Time almost. Certainly the Springs were here. The Young family came into Christian County, what is now Christian County, in the 1830s, and Archibald Alexander Young and his family came over to this territory well before the Civil War. And this cabin is one of the few old, authentic pioneer cabins still standing in Christian County. We'll call it the Young Cabin. I'm Wayne Glenn, and I hope you've enjoyed our trip. We're going to do this again sometime, I hope. But for now, so long, everybody.